This is for all those folks out there that are curious about EVs and wondering what it's actually like to take a Tesla on a long-distance road trip. Do I get stranded with nowhere to charge? Do I have to wait for hours when I do find a place to charge? Is it painstaking to find places to charge? And how frequently am I stopping to charge? Well, first let's recap my car. It is a 2023 Tesla Model 3 standard range, rear-wheel drive, with a 60 kilowatt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery pack. I've owned it for a year and a half. It's got 30,000 kilometers on the odometer. So how does one plan out your road trip and figure out all the charging stops needed along the way? For the Model 3, it's actually really simple. You just plug in a destination on the navigator, and it could be all the way across the country. Let's plug in the Roadway Inn in New Brunswick, which is about 1,000 kilometers away, just to show you. It plugs in all of the charging stops for you and shows you where you need to stop and charge and routes you there. And the car is actually pretty good at guessing how much range you're going to arrive at your next charging stop with. So if you wind up using up a lot more energy or a lot less as you drive, it'll readjust and put your charging stops closer or further apart as needed. And it takes into account pretty much everything: temperature, wind, elevation gain. And once you get to the charging stop, it tells you what you have to charge up to before you can head out to the next charging stop. And while the Tesla only uses superchargers to calculate along its route, if you want to be able to use any charger that your car is compatible with, including third-party and even slower chargers, you can use an app called a Better Route Planner. You can connect it to the car so it can pull your car's live power use data and basically do the same thing as the Tesla's in-car nav. As for how long I actually spend charging at a charging stop, one thing to keep in mind is that EV road trips are a lot different than gas car road trips in that you're not filling up to full every time you stop like a gas car does. Instead, you're only charging up as much as you need to get to the next charging stop with a little bit of safety buffer added in. And because of the way that EV batteries work, where they actually charge a lot faster towards being empty, your EV route planning software always tries to keep you at the lower end of your battery charge in order to minimize the amount of time you're actually spending at the charger. So really, you're only ever charging up to 60, 70, maybe 80%, only going above that if it's really necessary to get to the next charger and it's a little bit further away. If I plug this single day 1,113 kilometer trip into a Better Route Planner, you can see that the charging stops are basically every couple hundred kilometers or so. And I'm usually spending 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at each charging stop. It all depends on how far it is to the next charging stop. And while extreme heat and extreme cold will eat into my range, I did a whole video on what cold does to my Model 3's range, but the TLDR is that once the battery actually warms up from driving and charging, the range loss basically goes away. The only issue is the power used to cool the cabin and the battery in extreme heat. I've driven this exact trip before, and it was the perfect pace for me and my wife to stop and stretch our legs, use the bathroom, get coffee and food, something you always do in a gas car trip anyways. But by overlapping that with our charging stops, which are always usually located near amenities, you'd be surprised at how close the times are between road tripping in a Tesla and when I had previously done this exact same trip in my old Mazda 3. A lot of hotels and motels are starting to put EV chargers in as well, so I can basically plan it to start every day on a full charge for the first leg of the day. And even if I'm stopping at campgrounds, sites with electrical service will have RV hookups, which, since I have the right adapter, I can plug into and charge overnight as well. As for charging infrastructure, people still seem to have it in their heads that there is like no charging infrastructure out there for road trips. That is simply not the case. They are everywhere these days. I bought a CCS adapter so I could use non-Tesla fast chargers, and with that, I could pretty much drive anywhere I want in North America. And if I wanted, I could even drive out to Dawson City in the Yukon. And here's what that road trip would look like. Other than the chargers being a bit further apart and the chargers themselves being a bit on the slower side, you can see that even all the way out there, finding fast chargers really isn't an issue.